Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to this explainer, where we are going to completely flip the way you think about your finances. And as we go, you'll notice we're mapping these ideas out in a hand-drawn visual notebook style, because we're stepping away from the typical corporate spreadsheets today. See, we're so often taught that money is just math, right? We treat it like a hard science governed by rigid physics and perfectly optimized formulas. But what if I told you that understanding money is actually much less about math and almost entirely about psychology?
To prove it, consider this ultimate, real-life paradox. On one hand, we have Ronald Reed, a humble janitor and gas station attendant. On the other hand, Richard Fuscone, a Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive. Now, you'd naturally assume the financial genius ended up on top, right? Well, actually, wrong. Reed patiently saved over the years and quietly amassed an $8 million fortune, while Fuscone lost absolutely everything to bankruptcy, driven by heavy debt and greed. It's a staggering reality check that financial success isn't really about raw intelligence at all.
So to unpack exactly why that happens, we're going to be exploring the brilliant source material for this explainer, Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money. We're going to break down his absolute best, most timeless lessons on wealth, greed, and happiness.
Here is our roadmap for this journey. We'll start with the core premise, then uncover the hidden forces of luck and risk. Next, redefining wealth, before digging into the mechanics of survival. And finally, we'll close things out with the personal equation.
All right, let's hit Section 1, the core premise. Soft skills over hard science.
The absolutely crucial takeaway here is perfectly captured in this quote. Financial success is a soft skill regarding how you behave, rather than a hard science of what you know. Basically, how you act, your patience, keeping your ego in check, your emotional control, that completely trumps whatever technical knowledge you might have. Going back to our earlier example, Ronald Reed behaved well, Richard Fuscone did not.
Moving on to Section 2, the hidden forces, luck, risk, and the concept of enough.
You know, success and failure are never entirely driven by individual effort alone. Take Bill Gates. He experienced literal 1 in a million luck by attending one of the only high schools in the entire world that had a computer at the time, which completely paved the way to Microsoft. But his best friend, Kent Evans, who is said to be equally brilliant, experienced 1 in a million risk when he tragically died in a mountaineering accident before graduation. Luck and risk are siblings, and they heavily dictate our outcomes regardless of how hard we try.
And because we can't control those hidden forces, we really have to talk about the dangerous psychological trap of never enough. The hardest, but honestly most important financial skill you can learn is getting the goalposts to stop moving. Think of high flyers like Bernie Madoff. The guy was legitimately worth hundreds of millions of dollars, yet he risked everything and went to federal prison just to get a little bit more. There is absolutely no reason to risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need.
Which brings us nicely to Section 3, redefining wealth, the man in the car paradox. So, what is wealth? True wealth is the unspent assets you cannot see. It is not the money used to buy flashy things. In fact, spending money just to show people how much money you have is quite literally the fastest way to have less money. The author shares this amazing story of working as a hotel valet, constantly gawking at Ferraris and Porsches pulling up. But he realized he never gave the actual drivers a moment's thought. He was just imagining himself in the car. People use wealth to signal that they should be admired, but observers just admire the possessions. The illusion is the flashy $100,000 Porsche. The reality is often the car getting repossessed and the guy showing up a month later in an old Honda. True wealth is what you don't see.
Let's jump into Section 4, the mechanics of survival, compounding, and room for error.
Getting wealthy requires taking risks, but staying wealthy? That's a totally different game. That requires humility, frugality, and frankly, a healthy dose of survival paranoia. Take the legendary trader Jesse Livermore. He made $3 billion shorting the 1929 market crash. Unbelievable. But his massive success bred dangerous overconfidence. He bet it all again, lost everything, and tragically took his own life just 4 years later. Survival is the whole point of the game.
And why is survival so absolutely critical? Well, let me give you a number. $81.5 billion. Out of Warren Buffett's $84.5 billion net worth at the time the source material was written, $81.5 billion of it came after his 65th birthday. The secret wasn't just being some genius investor. It was surviving and being a consistent investor for 3/4 of a century. That is the crazy magic of compounding.
But staying in the game is tough because our viewpoints are so incredibly limited.
Your personal experiences with money make up a tiny, tiny fraction of world history, but they probably make up about 80% of how you think the world actually works. For example, a low-income earner buying a lottery ticket might make absolutely zero sense to a wealthy person, but to them, it might feel like the only tangible chance at a comfortable life. Because everyone's background uniquely influences their choices, we always have to leave room for error in our own judgments.
Which brings us to a crucial, unshakable truth. The most important part of any plan is planning for the plan not to go according to plan. Think about this. During World War II, a German tank unit sat in reserve, waiting for battle. They had the most sophisticated equipment in the world, but when it was time to move, the tanks wouldn't start. Why? Because little field mice had nested inside the machinery and eaten all the electrical insulation. You can build the best spreadsheet in the world, you can optimize every dollar, but you can never, ever model for the field mice.
Let's move to our final segment, Section 5, the personal equation. Reasonable beats rational.
When managing your money, aiming to be mostly reasonable works way better than trying to be coldly rational. You are a messy, emotional human being, not a perfect spreadsheet. Think about it like a fever. Fevers are a scientifically rational defense mechanism against an infection, but we take medicine to stop them anyway because hurting is unreasonable. Finances work exactly the same way.
Let's contrast this with a real-world example. The author and his wife paid off their mortgage entirely, even though they had a rock-bottom interest rate. Now, mathematically, that's completely irrational. They could have invested that cash for a much higher return. But emotionally, it was perfectly reasonable, because the profound feeling of independence let them sleep soundly at night. A mathematically optimal strategy will always fail if it causes you so much emotional panic during a market downturn that you just give up.
So, how do we tie all of these threads together? What can we actually take from this psychology and apply to our own daily lives?
Well, here are 4 really actionable takeaways. First, find humility when things go right and compassion when they go wrong. Remember, luck and risk are always a play. Second, use your money to gain control of your time. That's the ultimate goal. Third, be less flashy. People aren't impressed by your stuff. Seek respect through kindness instead. And finally, foster a healthy dose of survival paranoia so you can just stay in the game and let compounding work its magic over the decades.
And this brilliant quote really is the ultimate thesis of our explainer today. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want to pays the highest dividend that exists in finance. True wealth isn't a sports car or a massive house. It is simply the absolute freedom to live life entirely on your own terms.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought. I want you to look at the balance in your bank account, look at your career, and look at your daily schedule. Ask yourself, what is the highest dividend your money is currently paying you? Are you just buying flashy illusions, or are you actually buying your own freedom? Think about it. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.